Hello all, welcome to the new Simply Put series by Kalam IAS Academy. Today we are going to discuss the newspaper dated 16th of February 2024. So coming to the explain section of the Indian Express newspaper, first article we are going to discuss today is about the test of proportionality which the Supreme Court applied in nullifying the electoral bonds scheme. Then we will come to the amendments in the three key laws that the Supreme Court struck down and restored the status quoism. So these are the two articles which we are going to discuss today, which is displayed on. So the first article that we are going to discuss today is about the proportionality test, which the five-judge constitution bench of the Supreme Court have applied to unanimously strike down the electoral bond scheme. So what is this proportionality test? What is so disproportionate in this very case, this very matter of the electoral bond scheme? So here two things are arising about the legitimate state interest and about the rights of individuals that is getting violated. So here the question is, and in fact the question of the Supreme Court was that was the extent of state's encroachment into the rights of the individuals proportional to its objectives of curbing the black money or donor privacy protection. So we all know that the electoral bond scheme was brought about with an intention to curb the black money menace, to protect the donor privacy, right? And here we are jeopardizing the right to information by bringing this anonymity clause, by protecting the donor privacy over here. We are jeopardizing, we are compromising on the right to information of the ordinary citizens about the political party funding, about the candidates. So here the question was arising that was this extent of states encroachment into the rights, because rights of individuals are getting violated, and whether this violation of the rights of individuals to information to know proportional to its objectives, to the electoral bonds objectives of protecting the donor privacy and curbing the black money. Okay, so this test is called as proportionality test, and the court has used this test to test whether the state action is proportional here in this case or not. So here this test is actually deciding on whether this state action is a reasonable restriction under Article 19(2). Okay, and here the proportionality test is being tested between the right and the legitimate government interest over here. Here the legitimate government interest is to curb the black money, to protect the donor privacy, and the right which is talked about, which is getting jeopardized, is the right to information. So this proportionality test is applied by the judges to guard against the arbitrary action of the state, so that the state cannot take away the rights entirely even in pursuance of a legitimate state interest. For example, right to life cannot be taken away to ensure law and order situation. So from where this proportionality test came from? So this test was formally laid down in the 2017 seven-judge bench Puttaswamy ruling, which gave us the right to privacy. It laid down three tests. First is that existence of a law. So this electoral bond scheme was actually brought through a law, the Finance Act, which introduced the series of amendments in the Income Tax Act, in the Companies Act, and in the Representation of Peoples Act. Second is that this law must demonstrate a legitimate state interest. Here, this electoral bond scheme was having a legitimate state interest, that is curbing black money and to protect the privacy of the donors, therefore. Third is that whether the encroachment on fundamental rights, and here the fundamental right to information was getting violated, was getting encroached, whether this encroachment is proportional to the objective sought to be achieved. So this is the main question now. This test has been faltered upon by the electoral bonds scheme. How? For example, original requirement under section 29C of the RP Act 1951, which said that any contribution more than 20,000 needed a disclosure. But through the Finance Act 2017, which brought the electoral bond scheme, this requirement of declaring all donations in excess of 20,000 rupees would not apply to the donations received through the electoral bonds. So this electoral bonds was made an exception where any contribution excess of to 20,000 rupees won't be disclosed. Okay, and the Supreme Court said that this previous requirement of disclosing the contributions more than rupees 20,000 did an effective job of balancing the voters' right to information with the right to privacy of the donors. Because any donation which is below this 20,000 rupees is very less likely to influence the political decisions. Any individual, any ordinary citizen who is contributing less than 20,000 will have lesser influence on the political parties. Okay, and any corporate which is contributing unlimited, which is contributing huge crores of money to the political parties will have greater influence, which will have a grave influence on the political decisions. So this was the take of Supreme Court. So the stand of Supreme Court was that the voters' right to know, right to information supersedes the anonymity in the political party funding. And there are already less intrusive methods like electoral trust schemes, which was brought about by the UPA government in 2013 to achieve the objective of curbing black money and protecting donor anonymity. Let's now come to this scheme. So prior to this electoral bond scheme, this electoral trust scheme was there, established by the UPA government in 2013, which regulated the corporate individual donations to political parties, and it also emphasized upon transparency more. How? Because it mandates the reporting of the contributors and beneficiaries to the Election Commission of India. And this clause of electoral trust differs from the electoral bonds, which permits anonymous political donations. And therefore, because of this anonymity clause, the EBs are much famous. From the period 2017-18 to 2021-22, the money donated through EBs, electoral bonds, are over 5 times the amount that came through the electoral trust. So electoral trust were less popular because of this disclosure. Now we come to the Supreme Court striking down the amendments also in the three key laws. So the government made many amendments to the three key laws, that is Finance Act 2017, Companies Act and Income Tax Law, in order to prepare the ground for the electoral bond scheme. So the key changes which the government made by bringing the amendments to these three key laws were to completely do away with the donation limit for the companies. The companies were allowed to contribute unlimited now to the political parties. Before there were certain limit to it, but through the amendment the government removed that limit. The donation limit was made unlimited for the companies. Second, it removed the disclosure requirement, which was to declare and maintain a record of donations made through the electoral bonds. So let's now see individually that what the original act said and how the amendments were made through the Finance Act 2017, and what did the Supreme Court say this time in order to bring the status quoism. Okay, thus restricting the political donations. So for example, come to the first, that is Representation of People Act 1951, where the section 29C of the act required that the political parties to prepare a report always, which had the detail of all the donations received by them in a financial year. And also it required that the parties to declare all the contribution higher than 20,000 rupees. First is that they have to make a report, prepare a report having all the details of the donations received by them in the particular financial year. And second, they need to declare all the contributions higher than 20,000 rupees. But in the amendment through the Finance Act of 2017, it included an exception to this section 929C. This requirement to declare all the donations in excess of 20,000 rupees would not apply to the donations made through the electoral bonds. That means anybody who is donating through the electoral bond and that is more than 20,000 rupees, that did not require any disclosure. But the Supreme Court said that the original requirement of disclosing the contributions of more than 20,000 rupees did a very good job of balancing the voters' right to information and the right to privacy of the donors. Here, the right to privacy of the small donors were kept intact because they were more vulnerable to victimization. Corporates are less vulnerable to victimization. The individual or the ordinary citizens are more vulnerable to the victimization. Hence, it is required to preserve their privacy. So hence, any donation which is less than 20,000 rupees requires privacy, requires anonymity, and any contribution which is more than rupees 20,000 requires disclosure. So this balances this disclosure of more than 20,000 rupees balances the voters' right to information. Here the voters need to know that the corporates are donating how much, how big amount of money the corporates are donating, and also the right to privacy of the small donors are kept intact in this way. Then comes the Company Act 2013, where it had a cap on the amount of money that a company could donate in a single financial year. So there was a limit to the amount of money which a company or a corporate could donate, limiting to 7.5% of the company's average net profits during the previous 3 financial years. But this Finance Act of 2017 removed that cap on the amount of money that a company could donate. That means now the company can donate unlimited. Supreme Court said that permitting this kind of unlimited corporate contributions authorizes unrestrained influence of the companies in the electoral process, and it violated the right to free and fair elections because this economic inequality would lead to political inequality. Imagine a company A who is donating less and a company B who is donating more. So this company B will have more influence on the government, on the legislators, will have more influence on the legislators, and hence it will get more benefits from the government or more benefits from the legislators in return, which is the quid pro quo, which the Supreme Court has said that a mutual beneficial arrangement is possible when there is a huge contribution or transaction happening between the corporate and the political party, and it violates the right to free and fair elections because a rich political party which is contributing more, which is getting the contribution from the corporate in a more amount, has the capacity to carry on longer campaigns, has the capacity to influence the voters in a large way, in a significant way, in comparison to smaller political parties who are receiving small donations from the corporates or receiving no donation from the corporates. They are in a disadvantageous position because they don't have the capacity to carry on longer campaigns. They don't have the capacity to influence the voters. So understanding how the economic inequality is leading to political inequality and thus it is violating the right to free and fair elections. Now come to the third, that is Income Tax Act 1961, where it had a provision of maintaining a record of all contributions received that are above 20,000 rupees, and the record must be including a name and address of the person also. But a new section 13AD was added where all donations exceeding 2,000 rupees must be given through certain methods which included the electoral bonds. That means electoral bonds was made an exception to the disclosure requirement. And the Supreme Court said that exempting political parties from maintaining a record of the donations received through the electoral bonds would violate the right to information of the voters under Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution, right? And this curbing black money, protecting privacy of the donors, these are not mentioned under the reasonable restrictions under Article 19(1)(a). So how can it be a reasonable restriction under 19(1)(a)? So how can the right to information be violated in this case? Then coming to the major takeaways from the Supreme Court verdict yesterday, issuance of the electoral bonds will be stopped. SBI to submit all the details of the bonds purchased by the donors since April 12, 2019 to the Election Commission of India by March 6, and ECI to publish the entire information given by SBI on its website by March 13. So many jurisdictions around the world has struck this balance of legitimate public interest in transparency and anonymity, where they are preserving the anonymity of the small donors, where they are likely to be less influential for the government and more vulnerable to the partisan victimization, and large donors are more likely to strike quid pro quo arrangements with the parties. That means the large donors are more likely to get mutually beneficial arrangements with the parties. So we need disclosures of the large donations. So these two things has to be balanced. In UK, a party needs to report donations received from a single source amounting to a total of more than 7,500 euros in a calendar year. Okay, so more than 7,500 euros has to be disclosed. The analogous limit in Germany is 10,000 euros. So you can see that in countries like UK, there has been a limit beyond which it has to be disclosed in the public. Okay, so this was all about today's discussion. The short notes of this video discussion will be provided in our Telegram channel. Do join our channel with the link provided in the description box for all the important updates and posts. Till then, goodbye, take care, happy